So unless you're a panelist, I'll just ask you to mute yourself and turn off your camera for now. Um, I'd like to welcome everyone to the North American Lake Management Society, or NALMS's Student and Early Career Panel Discussion, Building Careers in Lake Management and Freshwater Science. I'm really inspired about the interest that we got for this event, which is probably more people than we would have had in person. So that's exciting. And thank you for your passion and interest in freshwater issues on this beautiful Monday. So as I just said, to ensure that the session runs as smoothly as possible, just please make sure that your microphone is muted and that your camera is turned off during the panel discussion, and then that way we can keep the focus on the panelists who are answering questions. In terms of asking a panelist a question, feel free to type them into the chat box at any time, and you can also just introduce yourself and say where you're calling from in the chat if you'd like, because we'd like this to be kind of a really interactive session for all students interested in freshwater issues to get to know each other. So yeah, you can either type a question into the chat box, and you can do that starting now if you have any questions for the panelists. Or if you prefer, you can use the raise hand function. So yeah, if you just go to the more at the bottom of your screen and then go to participants, at the bottom of the participants list, you'll see a raise hand button. So if you click that, I'll see that you raised your hand, and then I'll call on you, and you can answer your question on camera and on microphone if you'd prefer that over typing. So a couple different ways to answer questions, to ask questions to our panelists. But let's start with introductions. So my name is Liz Favot. I'm currently the student director of the North American Lake Management Society, and I'm going to be guiding the discussion today. I think maybe also on our call today is our incoming student director, Lauren Knows. So Lauren, if you just want to, if you're there, if you just want to say hi. Not sure if she's there, that's okay. So if this panel event is your first exposure to NALMS, welcome. And if after this event, you're interested in learning more about student and early career membership and programs at NALMS, or if you'd like to attend the technical sessions and plenary presentations that are happening during our 2020 virtual conference that runs from tomorrow for the rest of this week, just email me at student@nalms.org, and I'd be very happy to help get you set up to attend the rest of the conference if you're interested in that. I am a PhD candidate at Queen's University and a part-time school teacher in Kingston, Ontario, Canada. Kingston's on the northeast shore of Lake Ontario, and today I'm speaking to you from my home in that city. And my research uses microfossils in lake sediment to investigate long-term conditions and environmental drivers for the rising prevalence of cyanobacterial blooms in lakes in this region. And tonight we have 8 amazing panelists from diverse backgrounds, careers, and perspectives on freshwater management that are joining us today. So to all our panelists, I want to thank you so much for volunteering your time for this event. And now I will hand the floor over to our panelists to introduce themselves. So we'll just go in alphabetical order. So first we have Rachel Arsenault. So Rachel, can you tell us a bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. Hi. Thank you for having me, and good evening. My name is Rachel Arsenault, and I'm an Anishinaabe Kwe from Wikwemkong unceded First Nation on Manitoulin Island. I am a second-year PhD student at York, and I live here in Toronto. And while I'm still looking into water studies for my PhD, I'll mostly be discussing my experiences as a master's student working in this field. So I started my journey in water studies as a Master of Indigenous Relations student at Laurentian University in Sudbury. My thesis was focused on water insecurity in First Nations, which is a very big issue that is not well known or understood by many Canadians. And until 2014, I didn't really know that much about this topic myself. I didn't know there was a water crisis, and I had no idea how serious it was either. So water insecurity has impacted pretty much every First Nation in the province at one point in time or another. And many First Nations are still struggling with water insecurity every day. I'm sure some of you have seen glimpses of this in the news. Niskandiga was evacuated a few weeks ago because hydrocarbons were detected in their water supply. And they were in the news again today because they now have a positive case of COVID-19, which is also exacerbates the issue. So just wanted to open it up with that, and thank you for having me.
Thanks, Rachel. Next, we have Michelle Ballmer.
Hey everyone, my name is Michelle Ballmer. I am the outgoing Region 7 Director for NALMS, and that kind of oversees Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa, Missouri, and some tribal relationships. And I'm also the chair of the Education and Outreach Committee. I currently work for the Iowa Department of Natural Resources and started my career there in 2012 when I finished school. I currently work in the Lake Restoration Program. It's a program that's funded by our state legislature to the tune of about $10 million a year to do a bunch of restoration practices on publicly owned lakes and watersheds. And so a lot of my job involves community-based planning and working with a variety of stakeholders on how to get involved with your lakes, care about your lakes, and then what steps can we collectively take to improve water quality in our lakes. And I've been in that position since about 2015. Prior to that, I was the lake monitoring coordinator for the DNR. And I'm at my home office in Des Moines, Iowa right now. So I'm really excited to get to talk to all of you and excited to hear what kind of questions you have.
Thanks, Michelle. Next, I'll welcome Victoria Traby.
Hi, I'm Victoria Schreibe. I'm the Region 6 NALMS Director. So I am for the South Central states and countries outside of the US and Canada. Let's see, I did my bachelor's in a very small liberal arts college in the Midwest. And then after that, I got a Fulbright scholarship to go to McGill University, which is where I was first trained in paleontology. So my research is very similar to Liz's. And then from there, I slowly worked my way back south. So I went and got my master's at the University of Minnesota Duluth, did research on Lake Superior, got my PhD at the University of Nebraska Lincoln, did research on Yellowstone National Park. And I tend to research the resilience of aquatic systems, especially when it comes to stressed watersheds and adaptive management. And so now I am a faculty, tenure track faculty at Tarleton State University in North Central Texas, which I'm done moving south. I don't want to get any warmer than this. And I've been here for about 4 years. And so I do most of my work nowadays on reservoirs in the area.
Thank you. Next on the panel, we have Ted Harris.
Hey y'all, my name is Ted. I am a current assistant research professor at the Kansas Biological Survey. And my position is a little funky, so let me explain it. So the Kansas Biological Survey is a standalone state agency, and it is also a research unit of the University of Kansas. So because it is both of those, I am also technically faculty at the University of Kansas. My position is made up of all research. I don't have to teach any classes. So that is good or bad, depending on if you like to teach classes. I shall say that the assistant research professor track is parallel to a tenure track position. So just like Victoria can become an associate professor, I could become an associate research professor. So it's very similar. And I also believe there are roles in universities, although I don't have one, as an assistant lecturer professor. I've started to hear of these sorts of roles. So just to let you know that there are these other roles sort of starting to work their way into academia. I get funding from things like cities, like right here in the city of Lawrence, Kansas, which is where I'm located at, the state of Kansas, and then federal sources. I've even gotten NSF funding. So I have the ability to be flexible in that as well. The other two things, let's see, I'm a former USGS hydrotech. So I did that for 4 years. And yeah, I see Sabina right there. I know that life. Really enjoyed that. That was an awesome time too. And I did that along with getting my PhD right here at the University of Kansas. And I'm also a former NALMS student director, so I wanted to give a shout out real quick to Liz for putting this on. I know it is so much work, and I'm so thankful, and I hope we get some super awesome questions. I'm excited to be here and answer any and all questions that anyone may have. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Ted. Next up on the panel, we have Emily Mayer.
All right. Hi, guys. So my name is Emily Mayer. I'm the biology project manager with Solitude Lake Management with almost a decade worth of experience in lake management. How I first started out was actually at Centenary University, earning my biology degree. And while I was going to school, I ended up getting an internship with a smaller company called Allied Biological, where it just kind of snowballed into a career. I started out as a seasonal and decided this is the field I wanted to be in. So I further pursued more education by earning my master's degree at the University of Florida online in fisheries and aquatic sciences while working as a full-time biologist at Solitude Lake Management. Some of my primary responsibilities include managing the biology team, doing SAV mapping, developing water quality monitoring programs, and other specialized work.
Next up, we have Kelly Merrill.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kelly Merrill, and I'm an aquatic ecologist, officially an environmental scientist with the state of Vermont's Department of Environmental Conservation. And it's been my privilege to get to monitor Vermont's inland lakes for compliance with the Clean Water Act for the last 20 years. Before that, I did stints in environmental consulting in Massachusetts, worked for the feds at EPA in Narragansett, Rhode Island, and worked for the University of Maryland Research Lab at Horn Point. I have somehow Zoom bombed this early career panel, and I'm hoping it's just because Liz was completely blinded by my continued enthusiasm for this field and the rewarding nature of this work. I'm relatively new board member at NALMS, serving as the Region 1 director. And I'm here broadcasting live from my home in Vermont.
Kelly, it's your youthful good looks.
Thanks, Kelly. Sabina, you're up next. So why don't you tell us about yourself?
So hello, everyone. My name is Sabina Perkins, and I am currently a physical scientist at the U.S. Geological Survey. I started in February, so I haven't been working there very long. I got my start in lake management coming back from college and with a marine biology degree and looking for jobs in marine biology and not finding anything. And so I started volunteering for a limnological consulting company in Connecticut and ended up working there for about 4 years and loved every minute of it. And then decided that I didn't know enough about some of the things that we were seeing issues in, specifically cyanobacteria. And so I decided to go back and get my master's at the University of New Hampshire. And while I was there, I worked with the New Hampshire Lake Slay Monitoring Program. And so I have some experience with doing volunteer monitoring work as well. From there, I met my current bosses at a NALMS conference, and things just kind of snowballed from there. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to this panel, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys have.
Thanks. And I think last but not least on the panel, we have Guy Thierry Tanquano, and I hope I've said that right because I know Guy, we were in the same lab together in his master's.
Yes, you got that right. Yes, my name is Guy, and I'm from Burkina Faso, West Africa. Grew up traveling quite a bit and always enjoyed seeing how different people interact with the land. So when I started my undergrad, I knew I wanted to do something around, I guess, local development of resources and how people interact with it. I was in Nova Scotia, and there was a whole lot of conversations around the impact of gold mining on communities, and especially in lakes. And that's kind of how I found my path into limnology. And I saw a book by John Small that I somehow got the courage to just email him. And after a conversation with him, that's why I got drawn into Queens for a master's, and had the pleasure to meet lovely people like Liz. And over there, my research would be tangential between biology in terms of the environmental and biological impact of mining, and kind of more of a geology aspect and empirical contamination values, especially from arsenic. And from there, I ended up going to do more research at Waterloo for a year, where I moved away from mining operations more into agricultural developments. And so that's when I started looking a bit more at cyanobacteria and things like that. And then I moved to Ottawa, and I am a consultant here, I call myself an environmental consultant, but it's more like management and sustainability. And a lot of it is just around gathering the right people in the room to have those technical conversations. And it's been quite a shift from academia, but it's one of those where I didn't know that was what I wanted to do until I started doing it. Yeah, happy to be here.
Great, thanks, Guy. Yeah, I hope to hear more about that later in the panel. So before we jump into questions, I want to do one quick poll about like the attendees in the session, and just so if Todd or Alyssa is behind the scenes, if we could cue that up. So is everyone seeing it coming up on their screen? So first question is, where are you calling from? And I guess we'll give it a minute to see the responses come in.
Oh, speaking of polls, if you like to take polls or do trivia, I'm going to put in a shameless plug if I can while they're answering.
Yeah.
So Thursday night, we're doing our first ever trivia night online. We've been putting together some excellent questions, if I say so myself, mostly because I wrote them all. So following the awards ceremony, please stick around online. We're going to do an online trivia night that is very loosely water-based. So, you know, come, bring your family, bring your friends that live with you, and we'll have a great time.
So can we see the results from that poll, if that's possible? This is not how I thought this was going to work. Oh, there we go. So did you guys see the results pop up? It says 30% are coming from the East Coast, 13% are coming from the West Coast of the US. Can you guys see that, or just me?
Yes, can see it.
Yeah. Oh, we actually have a lot of Canadians on the call. That's interesting. All right, let's go to the next question, if we can. So this one is just letting us know what kind of an attendee you are. Like, are you a grad student, an undergrad student? Are you early in your career, or are you late in your career? Oh, there's someone from Northern Ontario I see in the chat. That's exciting. East Coast postdoc, that's cool. Middle of the Great Lakes, undergrad, yay. Wow, a lot from Northern Ontario, that's really cool. Can we see the results from that one?
Are you seeing them?
Not quite yet.
Zoom is not really.
They're up now. So mostly early career, which is actually interesting that not most people are students, but cool, welcome. Okay, and last question, if we can cue that up. This one's more fun. To get you guys ready to interact and ask questions. What is the best lake? Todd,
I
could
feel
you
like
get...
for this one, we should have an option to add a new lake to the list.
Yeah, I wanted to make it so you could just type in any lake, but I guess that wasn't possible.
I'm working on a lake right now called Possum Kingdom. So I think as far as names go, that's a pretty good one.
I feel like I've heard of that. I don't know if one of your students maybe presented on it last year.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
It's also the name of a Toadies CD, right? Is that why? Because they're from Texas?
Oh, is it? I don't know. It might be
I
it's named
think
after the
so.
lake.
Oh.
Ah, okay.
All right, so people like their local lake. I understand that. I put that answer too. All right, okay, so enough with the dilly-dallying. We'll get to what you came here for today. So yeah, we want this event to be as interactive as possible. So please absolutely feel free to enter any question in the chat or just raise your hand and I'll call on you to answer with video if you'd prefer that. So to start, I'd like to ask each of the panelists to weigh in on which skills and qualities do you think are most beneficial to your specific job? And we'll go in reverse alphabetical order this time. So Guy, can you weigh in on that first? What do you think are the most beneficial qualities for a job in consulting, like what you're in?
I feel like, well, two that come to mind immediately. The first one would be just kind of more of a general life skill in terms of communication, because a lot of it has to do with working with clients and anticipating or understanding what they want, even when they don't necessarily know what they want themselves, and anticipating what the next step might be to the process, because sometimes they're already head down and may not really see the big picture. And the other one I was going to bring up was just general curiosity and open-mindedness. But again, I feel like these are more like general life skills that don't necessarily focus on consultants. So maybe I come up with something that's very consultant focused in the moment. But that's where my mind drifted to.
Sabina, what about a job at the USGS?
I mean, I'm with Guy that most of the things that are important to my job are just kind of important life skills. So also communication, because, you know, I have a lot of coworkers that I work with closely, and, you know, the better we communicate, the better we get things done. Also, you know, flexibility is kind of key, you know, being able to pivot from, my job involves being able to pivot from doing lab work to doing field work. And so, you know, a little bit of flexibility goes a long way in being able to navigate those things. Also, as far as a, you know, specific skill, being able to manipulate data in R has been incredibly useful for me in order to ask questions and get answers to those questions. Yeah, and there's definitely others, but those are some of the top ones.
Kelly, what about in your job?
So I find that for me, just in whatever job I've worked in this field or in the aquatic sciences in general, really having that sense of curiosity and also a sense that I can make a difference. As a scientist working in government, I keep in mind that the Clean Water Act really has my back. I heard that from lawyers. And for me, staying true to really what drives me and my curiosity has really allowed me to follow the advice of the late Joseph Campbell, who was a literature professor from Sarah Lawrence College, who said, quote, "When you follow your bliss, doors will open where you would not have thought there would be doors, and where there wouldn't be doors for anyone else," end quote. And I heard that quote, just as I was graduating from high school. I remember watching Joseph Campbell give that advice as part of the Bill Moyers program on PBS called The Power of Myth while I was living on a boat on Long Island with my mom. And it really had a profound effect on me and really helped me make difficult choices really over my career when I would be presented with these different big choices in my life or in my career. Say to leave a higher paying position for lower temporary positions that were more aligned with what was my actual curiosity and bliss. And ultimately those hard choices paid off, and I did eventually get a full-time position working in the field that I love and at doing something I love. But that was 5 years after I finished my master's degree, jumping around from, temporary jobs. I got a couple of permanent jobs, and then I was like, I didn't really like where those were headed. And I was becoming an expert in something that I didn't really love or wasn't driven by. So when the opportunity came along to be paid less and take a temporary job and lose all those benefits and everything, I took that, and those were big decisions to make, but I have not looked back. And I would recommend when you get to those sort of decision points in your life, it really pays off if you can keep pursuing what it is that just drives you, and just try to do that.
Emily, what about your job at Solitude? What do you think skills and qualities are most important for your work there?
I'm going to kind of expand on what some of the others have said so far, because it's very true. Everybody brings up some really great points. As far as more technical skills, learning software programs like ArcGIS for mapping, RStudio for statistical analysis, utilizing your presentation skills are very important when you're communicating with the public or any associations in general. Take as many grant writing classes as you can. And this is a little bit difficult because it depends on your state or if you end up deciding to move to a different state later on, but try to get your feet dipped into kind of the regulatory side of things as far as permitting. The more knowledge, the better. And some advice for those early in their career, definitely do internships, whether they be paid or not. You never know what door they're going to open.
Ted, do you want to tell us what about being an assistant professor?
Sure. Well, it's everything it's lived up to be, good and bad. So I have a couple of qualities. I thought some of the qualities that, one, I thought is so important, and maybe people have different names for this. I would say determination or some sort of overwhelming desire to just keep going, because there aren't many jobs in tenure track positions or even those adjacent to those. And so you just need something there to, no matter how many times you get knocked down from not receiving grants or getting rejected for publications or whatever it is, there's a lot of failures before you get big successes. So, some sort of determination will fire something like that. The other quality that I thought of was just positive energy. I try to always bring that with me. And that's sort of like Kelly said to some extent, right? That it's just like you just bring the energy with you, and all of a sudden some of those doors just start to open. People can feel it. And And so, yeah, it's something that at least I think has really helped me. As far as skills, well, of course, there's writing. You have to write grants. You have to write papers after you get the grant. You have to write with your students, write. Technical writing is important for anything. And that kind of goes off of what Emily said. Whenever you present, technical writing is just another form of presenting and conveying your knowledge to somebody else. I will say something, and now I can't remember who said it. Maybe it was Sabina. Coding, though, coding is so important. It is such a time saver later on. And it seems like I need to learn what's going on first before I learn some basics R coding and visualization. I would say that's not true. I wish so badly that my undergraduate students can do all my coding in R. I don't know why that's not a thing, but it's just not. And it should be, because I'm not very good at it and they look to me for help. So, you know, maybe there are others on the panel who feel exactly like this. That, you know, if I had a student that brought coding, well, for example, I had a student, an undergraduate student, knew how to code, didn't know anything about water, and she made a whole website to do water database inventory. And she was like, I don't know what any of this means, but look at how great this is. And it was amazing. So if you can code or get in classes where coding's a part of it, R or Python, that's going to take you maybe over that next little bridge or bump in the road that you have. Those are the two that I thought of.
Cool. So for those of you who attended the beginners R workshop today, good job. You're on the right track. Victoria, what about your take on being a prof?
Yeah, so I'll just add to some things in academia. It's funny how much we don't really learn in our graduate programs that we have to know how to do in academia. So how to run a budget. Not usually something we get run, and how to create one for writing a grant. So if you're in a lab, take some time and figure out how much stuff costs and how much do you actually use for a project? How much would you need to do a similar project in the future, that kind of thing. I would definitely second coding. I would also, if you're still in school, suggest you take a GIS class, just so you know some of the fundamentals of that. And then I think, especially in academia, but maybe some other areas of ECR work, it's really tempting to kind of jump into everything to kind of prove that, like, you're supposed to be there and I'm determined and I'm, you know, reliable and you can count on me, and that's great. But I think there's a skill that you learn along the way about how to say no, like nicely, but kind of delineate I'm going to focus on this. This is what I'm good at, because otherwise they will throw like everything in the kitchen sink at you. And then you're overwhelmed and then you hate your job. And hopefully we're all here because we love this type of stuff and we want to stay here. So just how to say no and kind of delineate where you're going to serve your best. That's my thing.
Yeah, good point for sure. Michelle.
Oh man, so many great things so far. I'm going to second some of the stuff that has been talked about with the just general coding and database management. These are skills that are not often taught or pushed either in undergraduate or your graduate career. And I'm going to follow that up with learn the free programs. Don't learn the ones that you have to pay for. I mean, you can, but if you work for a government agency or a lot of other places, they're not going to want to spend $3,000 to $5,000 on statistical software packages for you. They'll want you to use the free one. So it would behoove you to learn the free one right away, in my opinion. This is probably my greatest regret from school, is that I didn't spend enough time focusing on how to manage data, either within a database or really understand how to frame data to where it's going to be useful for you for a very long period of time and large data sets, and then how to manipulate it using statistical software mainly. But GIS is a great program. It's relatively easy to pick up. It changes so much so frequently that, quite frankly, you're constantly going to be learning it if you don't already know it. The nice thing is there's some really great people out there for resources. And if you end up in a place like I am, in a state agency, we have a whole section of just GIS analysis. So normally when I hit that hurdle, I just go find someone who specializes in that and does that thing better than I can do it. And then the other thing that really is a big part of my job, but might not necessarily be so much for some of the other panelists, is learn how to translate. So much of my job is interacting with the public or interacting with a variety of different audiences with a very, very different set of technical skills. And so a lot of my job is taking what we know as lake managers or scientists that's very, very technical, and then making it so it's super understandable for anybody else in the room and that they'll care about it. Because it's one thing to talk about why phosphorus is important and limiting phosphorus is important. It's another thing to translate it to, so you don't want your kids to get sick when they swim. Here's how we stop that from happening. And so learning how you can translate really complex concepts into simple things, I think will help you regardless of where you land in your career, but it's been super, super important for me.
Michelle, do you mind if I add something to that?
Of course, go for it.
I was just going to say, I think that it's an important skill both to translate complex ideas into simple ideas, but it's also a really important skill to be able to talk between disciplines. So
Yes.
translating between engineers and ecologists, translating between, you know, biologists and physicists.
Oh
Like,
man, I'm so glad you brought that up, because we do a lot of construction engineering, and I never thought in a million years going to school that I'd be looking at construction engineering plans and being like, you know, we really need a 3-to-1 slope on this because it's going to improve the habitat. But I tell you what, now that I know that, it's really, really paid off. So that, oh, thanks. That's a great point.
Yeah.
All right, and Rachel, what about, because you're a grad student right now, right? So what skills do you think are important for that?
So for myself as a researcher, I would say it's listening. As a researcher, you can't really produce meaningful results if you don't listen to the people that you're trying to assist. And the second quality or skill that I would say would be an ability to engage and collaborate with others. I don't think sorry, I'm losing my words here. I don't think decision-making processes should be one-sided. And I don't think decisions should be made on behalf of one group or another when everyone is capable of coming up with their own ideas and solutions. So those are the two I would say, listening and collaboration.
If I can jump in here, would that be okay?
Go for it, Guy, yeah.
No, so what Rachel just said, and earlier when we were talking about the translation aspect, I think that for me is one of the most important aspects going forward in terms of translating documents and information that may be easy for us to understand, but for the public to be able to understand, because eventually the decisions that we make in terms of policies are for public good, and being able to have them involved in decision making requires that translation ability.
Okay, so we're going to jump into the audience questions because there are a lot of them. So panelists, just feel free to chime in and build off each other whenever you want. I won't call you out individually. So the first question we have comes from Kayla Glenn, and she wants to know, what does a day in the life of consulting look like?
Oh, that's
yeah, go
no,
Guy,
please,
go
do
Guy.
go ahead.
Sorry. I mean, I think that Guy had a really good answer in the chat. You know, it totally depends on the type of consulting. I was working for a company that worked quite closely with Solitude, doing aquatic plant surveys and mapping and stuff like that. So my consulting day involved a lot of field work, you know, like going out on a boat and, you know, looking at aquatic plants, and it was really fun and really cool. And so, you know, that's one aspect of consulting, one aspect of what consulting can look like. And then, you know, data analysis, writing up reports, stuff like that. So that was an experience from a very, very small consulting company. So, you know, we worked out of my boss's basement. You know, it was a low budget, but high fun, and you know, a great community who really cared about the lakes that we were trying to protect. So that's one aspect of what consulting can look like.
So another kind of a day in the life some days I'm waking up at 3 in the morning to go to Long Island to go survey a site to do veg surveying, identifying all the plants. Then it's a lot of driving coming back home because you can't just teleport to the sites yet. So then some other days I'm looking at algae under the microscope, doing some algae counts, reaching out to clients, letting them know what their levels are at, talking with brand new clients, writing up proposals. Later on in the winter is more kind of office time here in New Jersey. So we're just writing up all the reports, gathering all the data, doing a lot of data entry and analysis like that. So each day is not necessarily the same. Possibly it's the same May through November where you're out in the field every day. But otherwise it varies from day to day. So
I had some experience doing environmental consulting, and where I was actually doing a lot of SAS coding, and then worked on a variety of some other different projects. But one of the things, having worked now in government and in environmental consulting and in academia, that stood out to me, at least in my experience, and I was at a small consulting firm as well, was just really the pressure for being billable for all, at least where I was, you really had to get your hours in to what you had put in your bid to the whoever you were getting your contract from. And a lot of times, depending on who you're, some consulting firms and some bosses are going to be good at really appropriately estimating what the workload is. But a lot of them may also try to undercut each other by underbidding, and you end up putting in time that you wouldn't otherwise be able to get paid for because you have to make the deadline. You promised this as a work product, and oftentimes I would send off our thing right at the, by our deadline, and no offense EPA, but I'd get an automatic reply from EPA that said, I'm on vacation for the next 2 weeks, but I had stayed up really, the night before trying to get that work done. I did leave environmental consulting to work for EPA after that, but just.
One of the things that you're saying, and I think that connects a little bit to what Victoria was saying around budget, was definitely figuring out a little bit around how to budget your own time. And so time management is just a little bit of a different aspect from in academia, when I had to forecast, but not in the same way. And especially attaching a certain value to my time, that was definitely something that was weird and still is, but getting used to it a bit more.
I also wanted to add that sometimes, even though you have a set schedule for the week or for the day, that totally goes out the window when an emergency call comes in that says, hey, I have a fish kill. Can someone please come out here and do an assessment? So sometimes you get emergency calls like that too.
Okay, this question is from Sarah Burnett, and I've selfishly chosen it because I've been wondering a lot about it too. It really applies to me lately. So she wants to know, what tasks would you suggest to a student who's about to complete their degree in less than a year, to prepare them to go into the big wide work world?
Is that undergraduate or graduate student?
I think either. I guess just being thrown into the job market, like what are the first things you should do?
Well, I guess I'll go since my microphone's off already, and lead this off. I guess for my students, and I do have a couple of undergrad students, especially that are in their last year, I try to do a couple things. I try to get them involved in some sort of publication of something, just a report, something small that they're a part of, that they get to see that. So that they actually get to see, I went to this project and now this is what gets turned in at the end. And even have them as co-authors or something like that. I also try to get them to at least to do one presentation, even if they're just a co-author, or even if like other people or myself has done most of the work. It's like, just go present it. Like, just go to a meeting and go out there and go do it. Even if you fall flat on your face, you at least know like what you're getting yourself into if you want to take the next step for graduate school. So I guess those are my two things, is just get out and do it. I also try to teach them as many methods as I possibly can. And I'm lucky enough to do large scale experiments, paleontology, just some routine sampling, high frequency sensors. So I try to get them on all the projects so that they gain this big, broad knowledge of skills that hopefully allows them to at least know what's out there. If you don't know what's out there, then you can't pursue it. So at least I try to give them, you know, a big broad of like, here's all the things that happen, that somehow all happen within my group, but usually people do them differently. And you can do one of these, all of these things, more than this, and even combine them.
I think a lot depends on where you want to land or what your next step is, whether it's graduate school or you're trying to find a long-term career. The first thing I would recommend is call your network. Call everybody you know that is already in this field and scope them out. If you're looking for a job, the best place to get one is to find one through someone you already know. So make the connections at places like NALMS. And then when you're getting close to graduating, call all those people and see if they have something that's coming down the pipeline that you might be interested in the next 6 months to a year, so that you can start honing your skills in for that particular opportunity. The other thing I'd make sure you do is have your CV up to date at all times. Even if you're super comfortable in your job, keeping your CV up to date is a great way to prepare yourself for whatever is next. Because if you find a job you want to apply for and the window for hiring is very short, it's going to be really hard to remember what presentation you gave at a conference 2.5 years ago. So every time you do something, add it to your CV right away. You can always take things off, but then you know it's ready to go. And then I know this is really challenging in the world of COVID right now, but if you're a student and you're at a university setting, I would highly recommend reaching out to your career readiness group on campus and scheduling a mock interview, be it online or in person when the time comes. Even if you can just go through the motions a couple of times, if you haven't interviewed for a lot of positions. I serve on the interview panels for a lot of hiring at our agency, and you can tell when people are more comfortable with a variety of different interview styles or have interviewed a lot before. So take advantage of those resources, do a couple mock interviews. They will walk you through like what things are successful within an interview, what aren't. And even if it's a Zoom call, please dress up for it. Please, 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 just trust me on this. I know, but I've seen a wide range in the last 8 months, and I'm telling you, it's a good impression no matter what. So those would be my quick things to do.
Sabrina, go ahead.
No, go for it, Guy.
Just going to kind of repeat what Ted was saying in terms of presentation. I think it's very important to get comfortable with speaking. The other aspect is also data management, which I think always goes as a kind of like skill that everybody appreciates. So that's always a more tangible one that people can work on. And now connecting to what was just said in terms of CVs, one of the things that I found very useful beyond just connecting with my networks, it's also connecting with them and asking others that have worked with you about what are some of the skills that you possess, because oftentimes you do not recognize them yourselves. I know for sure that my CV was probably 1/3 of the size that it was until I talked to my supervisors and others. Were like, oh, you do this and that. And I'm like, oh, I guess so. I just never really think about it the same way. So I think that really helps you call out strengths that you have that you may not be aware of.
These are all absolutely fantastic things. You know, like just to mirror what Michelle said and everybody else said about, you know, using your network. I have never successfully gotten a job that I've applied for without knowing, you know, the people that and the first job that I ever got was my sister's best friend's dad's karate buddy. So, you know, like, read the broad network. The network is broad. And so, you know, like, I 100% agree that, like, cold emailing people, if you have people that you want to work with, is actually way more, works out a lot of the time. Well, okay, maybe not a lot of the time, but definitely works out more often than you would think it would. Because that just gives people a face, a person to think of when they're thinking of how to fill their next job slot that they have open. Yeah, definitely taking advantage of those college career services. You know, I took advantage of the UNH Career Center for updating my CV and, you know, doing all sorts of things. They have people who know what employers are looking for, and it's very useful. And also your friends and family, you know, if you have anybody that, you know, is good at CVs.
And to add to Sabina, networks are really broad, and it also includes your academic or professional networks. So like in Paleo, at least, we joke about family trees based on which labs you come out of. So that's a thing too, so you can connect to people through that way. And there are lots of great ways to broaden your networks. So societies like NALMS, you can suggest meetups on the app and everything here. Twitter, Limno Twitter is actually pretty strong showing, so you can join those types of things. And then I would also suggest you develop your social media presence professionally. So like set up your LinkedIn, set up your ResearchGate, make sure that your Facebook is in check, you know, nothing you don't want employers to see, that kind of thing, because everything you put online now is visible. So make sure that it's what the kind of persona you want to be putting out there for professional standards.
Yeah, so definitely adding on to all these really great points, I would say is definitely to help you stand out when you're applying for jobs is doing an internship. And even as an added benefit, you might even end up having a mentor to guide you through, you know, through your next steps of your career, as well as getting involved in societies, doing student posters like we have at NALMS, plug. And also, you know, you as an undergrad, you don't have to necessarily go straight into a graduate program. You can take a year or two, get your footing, get your foot in the door somewhere. And even if you're still not sure, you know, you can always do certificate programs too and specialized software programs. You know, take that time to really think about it because it is a commitment, and take that time to research into a lot of programs. So, and definitely talking to others within the workforce, especially in these societies, they know people in other, you know, academic programs that they can help guide you to. So
I'm curious with our panel, how many of you took time off in between undergraduate and graduate school? So like half of us, because there's a question in the chat about should you take time off or not? And I think it's really an individual thing. I took 2 years. I worked in a research lab for 1 year, and then I did a year-long internship before I started graduate school and worked as a pastry chef. It's a weird mix. But I think a lot of it is trying to cultivate what you're passionate about and being realistic about the job market out there. I mean, I graduated undergrad in late 2007, right, going right into 2008, where there was a massive economic crash. There were no jobs. So I think I applied for like 100 of them right out of undergrad and got one interview and did not get that job. Thankfully, I'm really glad I didn't get it in hindsight. But, you know, I think read the market, see what opportunities are available. And if the right opportunity comes up for you right after undergraduate, or you know that this is the career you want and you have a clear trajectory, then go for it. But if it's not there, it's okay to wait a little while and figure out what you really want. At least that's my personal opinion. I'm really glad that I did the thing that I did. I did my master's and I'm very happy with that. I still toy at 35 with, do I want a PhD? Maybe. But I mean, you can dictate, your career can take a very long and winding path, and that's totally cool.
I just want to kind of tag team with Michelle here. I think it's the same way. I actually went like straight up from my undergrad, drove to Idaho, and my advisor, some of y'all know him, Frank Willem, was like, well, you got a month, and then there's going to be large plastic things in the lake, so better know how much to dose in them, and also you need to make them. But then I took actually a year, a little bit different transition. After my master's, I took a year and I just worked for USGS, and that actually allowed me to get my footing, get my master's published, kind of figure out if I wanted a PhD or not. And so that was super nice to get that. And the networking, gosh, that's so important. I think similar to Sabina, maybe I've gotten jobs that I've applied for or something, but it's not many. And including this job that I have now, I finished, and the director said of KBS, we really need someone who knows about harmful blooms in Kansas. And like, it's like, that's you, right? And I'm like, yeah, that is me. That's me. I know about them. And that's just how it started, right? So the networking is so important. It's not that big. I had another advisor once tell me, you know, in all of SIL, which is Society of International Analogy, there's only like 3,000 people. So it's a small club. You get to know everybody really quickly, and you're gonna want to use your network to get jobs.
I'd just like to second something that Guy has said in the chat about taking the time to talk to people that you admire as well. So I went into graduate school coming in as a PhD, and everybody was like, yeah, go for the PhD. That was, you know, my advisor in undergrad, that he'd done it, so I should do it. And when I was in there, you know, my advisors was, you know, like, you need to become one of us kind of thing. And I was out on a research cruise. And one of the things I was watching a lot of the academic, you know, advisors and people that had PhDs do was spending a lot of time writing grants and then, you know, chasing money, and they weren't getting out in the field as much, and they weren't really in the lab, and they weren't doing the things that I really wanted to do. And so when I was out on this research cruise as an undergrad, I got to talk directly, or no, I guess I was a master's student at that point, to a woman who was doing what I wanted to do. And she said to me, well, if you want to do this, then she discouraged me from going for the PhD and told me to go for the master's degree. I think that's changing now. I think, you know, it's, you know, we're hiring PhDs for all kinds of levels of jobs now these days. But, you know, this was back in the early 1990s. And I really took that to heart. It was this person who I wanted to, you know, I really wanted to do what she was doing. I really respected her a lot. She went on to, after that, running the dive program in Antarctica. You know, she was really somebody that I looked up to, and I thought she was really neat. And so I really took her advice to heart, and I withdrew from doing a PhD and went for the master's instead.
Okay, I'll throw a new question at you guys.
Liz, one more thing. Rachel brought up an
Okay.
awesome point in the chat, actually.
Yeah,
Rachel,
it's been just flying by.
I know, yeah. Rachel, could you bring that up about just knowing the people you're applying with. I think that that's a super important point. I think Victoria also noted that.
Okay, sure. So I just wanted to say that as someone who's been part of the hiring committee where I work, one of the things that we do look for is how well you know the organization or the company that you want to work for. That usually comes up in an interview, you know, like the standard questions, why do you want to work here? But also, what do you know about the company? So it's kind of good to know before you show up for a job interview.
Great point. Yeah. All right. What was the most beneficial thing that you did or experienced that helped you to get where you are today?
Saying yes to the random opportunities that come your way. You know, for me, that included, you know, like in the middle of doing all of this lake science stuff, I spent a year in Australia doing seagrass modeling for CSIRO, which is their Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organization. And, you know, that was where I learned about the importance of talking to engineers, like the communication between engineers and ecologists that was what I was doing there. And, you know, also a little bit of the navigating the bureaucracy that can exist in government organizations. And so, you know, I 100% agree with Victoria that it is important to learn how to say no. But just as important is to be brave enough to say yes to something, like if it's something that you want to do, or if it's something that you think would benefit you or you could learn something from. You know, just saying yes to every learning opportunity if you can.
I think that's a very, very good point. For me, I would probably jump to just having tea with people. I love tea. And as much as I don't know when that came around, I love chatting with people. And random conversations lead you to just knowing more about different people's interests. And that allows you to then explore your own interests. And that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's how we create connections. And when you create connections, you create a network, whether it's intentional or not. And from that point of view, you then now have more opportunities moving forward.
Guy, I want to have tea with you. Let's have tea. That sounds so great.
Oh, tea is the best, yo.
To add on that, I know I mentioned earlier about internships. So how do you find an internship? Well, sometimes they will post an internship opportunity, but not always. Back when I got my internship, I just sent off an email. There was no posting, there was nothing. I went after the potential opportunity. I didn't even know if there was going to be or not. And that's kind of how the door opened up for me. So just sending an email could change the trajectory of your career.
Yeah, absolutely. And along those lines, if you're still in university, even if you're in undergrad, there's usually spots open in labs, but most universities don't have a centralized place to advertise that. So you just kind of have to ask professors. And a lot of times if you ask, they'll be like, oh yeah, I could have you do something. And especially if you're upperclassmen, they understand that you're trying to get experience to help you get to the next step. So they'll usually try to find you something. I have a lot of biomed students hang out in my lab and all they do is pipette things, but they need to do that in biomed too. So it works out just fine. So they can do that. And so those types of experiences are really helpful because talking about kind of experiences we had that really helped with our futures. Mine was my gap year, because I went and worked in a lab, and I was already trained to do the work that needed to be done for the master's program I eventually went into. And so it was a really nice fit in that. I think that really gave me an edge getting into that graduate program. So that kind of experience is really helpful.
And if you're at that juncture, between undergraduate and graduate, I cannot stress this enough. Really try and get to know the person that you're intending to work with as a PI. Talk to their students, figure out, what kind of lab they run, what your expectations are, how frequently you are going to meet with your PI, and what those conversations might look like, and whether your work style and their work style are congruent with one another. I know for many of you, you might be past this boat and going, yep, wish I would have done that one differently, or gee, I got lucky. But as someone who maybe should have explored those things a little bit more before I started graduate school, I would recommend just really try and have a lot of conversations with the PI and others in that department on the front end. And then the other thing that I would say is read outside of your normal scope. So we often go into our graduate work or whatever with kind of blinders on of like, this is my area of focus and this is what I'm going to read about and do. And for example, I finished my master's having never really read a single piece of legislation on water regulation. And then I immediately, like Kelly, went into a government job where everything was built on the backbone of the Clean Water Act in the US. And I'm sure there are similar regulations in Canada. And so I would say, read some of those things as a student, spend some time reading policy and regulation and try and understand how that framework works, because you'll find that it's often you as a scientist, your knee-jerk reaction is, oh man, half the lakes in America are on the impaired waters list. Well, what does that really mean? And so when you start to understand the framework of how these things were set up, then it starts to make more sense. And then you can come back to that translator role of being the scientist who can then effectively communicate where we're at in the world within that context. So sorry, those were really all over the map.
I just wanted to follow up on one of the things that you said, Michelle, the kind of knowing what you need to know in order to successfully navigate grad school. I found there was a book that I found really helpful that was called Getting What You Came For. I'm going to put it in the chat, but it was like, it laid out all of the different things for applying to grad school, before you apply, like when you're applying, what you need to, like talking to people in the labs, like it's really important. This is how long you should expect to be in grad school. And it might be a little dated now, but it's, still something that you could glean some important knowledge from if you're looking to get into that grad school life.
So I'll go back to my, in thinking about the question about like what most influenced how I got the job I have now, I think it was the two decisions that I made over my career to take demotions. One was when I was in environmental consulting and I was sort of going down a track of working more in drinking water, which wasn't like really I wasn't that jazzed up about. It was really interesting work, but it wasn't really what drove me. And then this temporary job came up working in the field and doing water sampling for EPA Narragansett. So I left a full-time position with benefits and took this temporary job. That gave me the experience that then, ironically, the experience when I did move to Vermont, I got a permanent job again with the state of Vermont, working in drinking water because of my experience in environmental consulting. And then a job came up in the Lakes program, but it was a much lower job or whatever, classification or whatever. And I decided, well, I'm going to go for that demotion too. And, you know, these were things because the other two trajectories I was on was sending me in a direction that wasn't really where my real heart was. So yeah, I mean, it's sort of counterintuitive. And I had the luxury of being married and, you know, having benefits through my husband so that I could do those types of things. But, you know, when it comes down to it, if you can do it, it may be hard at the time, but it's probably worth it in the long run, potentially.
Okay, I have another question, and I'd like to start with Rachel on this one. Did you have a defined career path from the beginning, or have you ever struggled with what your end goals were, and how have you dealt with that?
Okay, I'm actually glad you brought this up because I was going to say this during the other discussion. So oddly enough, my BA was in geography. I had a very hard time finding a job with that in Canada. I've worked a whole bunch of different fields. I've even done social services. And then when I was working for an Indigenous political organization, I thought, wow, you know, one thing I'm really passionate about is Indigenous politics. And I'm also really passionate about water. And that's what led me to do my master's. So yeah, you can kind of, you know, shape your career any way you want. But, you know, don't be afraid to stray from the path a little bit because sometimes that gives you the thinking time that you need.
I definitely didn't know what I wanted to do at first. I knew it was something in biology. I just didn't know what. And again, it wasn't until I took an internship and figured out, hey, this sounds pretty good. And then when I made it through my Bachelor of Science degree in biology, graduated, was still working as a seasonal at the lake management company. As at the time, I wanted a full-time position, but they couldn't provide it. So I was like, all right, well, I got student loan debt. I need a full-time job. So I remember I applied all summer long. It probably took me like 6 months before I could find something. Ended up getting, you know, a job offer with another consulting firm, went there, was there for about 6 or 7 months working in their permitting division. And that was just not my jam. I was not happy doing permitting and I realized, hey, that part is not for me. And then through, again, my mentor from the previous job, just coincidentally reached out, just keeping in touch with him, was like, hey, we're looking for, you know, a full-time biologist. Know anybody? And I'm like, me, please bring me back. So.
All right, guess I jump in. I have a weird path, and it's probably gonna get weirder as the years go by. But there was a time I was sitting around looking at, having like that internal conversation. I was looking at doctor, politician, or scientist. Doctor, I was like, wait, I don't really like hospitals, and after experiencing some losses in my family, I just didn't want to be that close to death. Then I look at politics, and the figures I admire were people like Thomas Sankara, Steve Biko, Nelson Mandela, Fred Hampton. I was like, that does not look like happy ending type stories. So shift into science by elimination. And while I did that, I was very interested in kind of natural resources development, but more from a community perspective than from a purely economical perspective. And the other aspect that I was interested in was just like ecological damage through those developments. And that's kind of how I ended up doing research on gold mining and impacts. And when I eventually connected with the chairman at where I work currently, we talked a lot about not just the science of it and the technical aspect, but the community involvement and engagement, and how to essentially translate between engineers, politicians, academics, and just the communities on the ground. And like I said earlier, I didn't know that this was what I wanted to do until I chatted with him. I was like, this is what I want to do. So that's been my path so far. It's probably gonna get weirder. Stay tuned.
We could certainly use more scientists in politics. You can always go back. But, yeah. So I didn't shift quite as much. I've always been a biologist, but I think all scientists realize that their field has lots and lots of subfields to it. Because I started out as a marine mammologist. So if I had followed my plan, I would be sitting in a canoe counting manatees in Florida right now. But yeah, Michelle and Savita, yes, we're all the same. But 2008.
Oh yeah, I trained dolphins before this.
Oh, see, yeah, see. And I worked at a
Coral
zoo.
reef biologist here.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice. So, and 2008 was hard like that. So those of you entering now, we're going into another recession, and like that definitely changes the landscape of funding and what's available in terms of research positions or graduate positions. And so I was put in the position of, there wasn't a lot of money for organismal biology. And so I kind of took stock of like, well, what did I really care about? And I decided to like backdoor it. So instead of focusing on a specific animal, I was going to do environmental science to protect habitats. And then I kind of find my way back to Florida. I'm on the wrong side of the Gulf at the moment, but there's still time. But I think that's part of it is if you can't find the job, the perfect job that you think you want, maybe kind of look at the broader context of like what really makes you passionate, because it might be something slightly different. So even if it's something that ends up being more policy oriented or teaching oriented, I used to be like the shyest person in the room, and it turns out that I really like talking to students, and that makes me happy for the day. And so there's always new ways to, develop new school skills and kind of figure out, what really makes you happy to get to at least near where you thought you wanted to be.
Okay, well, I want to throw a final question at you guys. And I just kind of want to know where you think the field of freshwater management, governance, whatever your specialty is, where do you think it's headed and what do you hope for in the future?
So I guess I'll lead it off if nobody else will. I thought about this question beforehand. I think really where a lot of science is going to go, and thanks to technological advancements, is really high frequency data, monitoring in real time or near real time, and then providing short-term forecasts, so that we're coupling, cutting edge science with actually providing cutting edge forecasts for blooms, degraded water quality, anoxia, all these things that that may need to be monitored or that people care about or that are environmentally regulated. So, I mean, it's hard to imagine some point where sensors don't get cheap enough where kind of everybody has them all over the place. And even something that surprised me, I've worked a lot with sensors with USGS, and even in my current position, have some projects with high frequency sensors. I called our local drinking water plant and said, I think I have this idea for a project, and was talking a little bit about the sensors, and they immediately went, oh yeah, we know. We spend like $500,000 on sensors every year, and we have sensors throughout our process that track everything from nitrate to like chlorophyll throughout the process to temperature to pH, and it was like, oh, so you know a lot more about sensors than I do. And I think that just goes to show you that pretty soon they're going to be out of the plants where maybe the general public doesn't see them, and more of those sensors are going to be out on our water bodies and trying to get better pictures at higher resolution at faster time steps than we've ever seen before, and probably really change the game about what we know about lakes and water bodies in general. So yay for science, yay also for for providing something that's a service that can actually help people save money or work more efficiently.
Totally agree, Ted. Just working off of that, with all of that sensor technology comes a whole bunch of data that needs to be managed, manipulated, and you have to be able to say something based off of that data that you collect. And so, either stats or machine learning or something that can make sense of that huge amount of data, where that's what we're dealing with right now. We just finished up a project on the Finger Lakes and I'm giving a presentation on it, and there is so much data, and we have to analyze all of that. And so that's where things like coding and R and Python come in really handy. The one thing that I hope doesn't get lost in this kind of revolution of sensor technology, and also DNA technology is another one of those things that's really improving, like environmental DNA. It's got so many issues, but it is becoming cheaper and cheaper to test for things with DNA. But with the advent of, with the expansion of all of these mechanical ways of sensing the environment, I worry that people will lose that kind of naturalist understanding of ecosystems and how systems work. And that's one of the things that I think is really important. And I don't want people to think that becoming a super expert in aquatic plants, for example, aquatic plants are super, super cool, and knowing how they function is really important to informing a lot of the interpretation and analysis that we're going to do on this sensor data. And so I think there's two sides to that knowledge that would be really good to have. Both the old school, reading the 1950s botany books, they're still pretty good. And then, understanding the cutting edge technology, both have a place.
Yeah, I think that's a very strong point. So, and the main thing that came to mind when you mentioned that was a bit less on the technical side. I guess just kind of where my mind is at these days, but closer to what Sabina was saying in terms of ecosystem valuation. And maybe that just relates to where a lot of my work is, which is in the Northern Territories of Canada. A lot of focus is on things like traditional ecological knowledge now, making sure that we are incorporating that as well as the technological advances. And with that comes things like community-based monitoring programs, which I think are going to be growing quite a bit in the years to come, especially in a time like right now with COVID, where people can just travel around the world to do monitoring. So people will have more opportunities to be stewards of their own environment. And in general, just forecasting according to land use planning. And I think for that, a lot of technologies that Ted mentioned are going to be crucial.
Yeah, just expanding on that further, as technology continues to advance and, we hope that the accuracy continues to be the best, I think that there's still going to be needing a lot of ground truthing really at the end of the day. So definitely people going out in the field and confirming, these readings, confirming what they're seeing, confirming that those plants are indeed the plants that you're seeing,
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true, because I think, and I think that there's going to be a lot more need for interdisciplinary research that's becoming more common. And that didn't really used to be a thing. I have an uncle who used to work for the Corps of Engineers, and he watched a dam, is how we used to describe his job. And I mentioned that I was in an interdisciplinary water resources master's program, and he was like, why? Like, why would you need to be interdisciplinary? Like, oh, okay. But I think we're getting to the point where we're realizing that we need to be able to get the biologists and the chemists and the physicists all in the same room with the engineers to make some of these decisions. And technologies, I think, is really going to help enable that. But at the end of the day, some things will be automated, of course. So I think a lot of where it's going to go is the ability to do more problem solving, to actually take the data we're given, this large amount of data, and make it something meaningful out of it.
So I think the future of freshwater science management and policy is both completely disheartening and at the same time quite hopeful. We're now getting a global perspective on the state of our freshwater systems, and with the advent of freeware like R has been talked about tonight, and the sharing of big data sets that are both temporally and spatially large, we are really seeing patterns that help explain some of what we see at both the local and watershed scale to the global scale. And I think that is super exciting. However, as is pointed out by the 2020 World Wildlife Fund, the planet is losing its freshwater biodiversity at a higher rate than we are losing our ocean and terrestrial biodiversity. The loss of habitat, overfishing, damming up of waterways, aquatic invasive species, and climate change are really huge stressors to these systems. And at least in the United States, the Clean Water Act identified a mechanism to help fund research and actual restoration and protection projects specific to lakes. Unfortunately, the US Congress hasn't funded this for the last 25 years. And as politicians wring their hands over what can we do about the increasing frequency and severity of lake stressors like cyanobacteria blooms, flooding, and drought, they actually hold the power to provide the support needed to help. And it doesn't require rewriting the Clean Water Act or amending it. It means funding Section 314. And I have a hope that NALMS, under the leadership of our new incoming president, Lisa Borre, that we can help bring this funding back as we emerge from this pandemic, as more and more people really realize what solace our lakes can be for our souls ravaged by the current pandemic, recession, and racial inequality of our nation. This kind of leaves out the folks that are all attending from Canada right now, but I think, you know, as we can maybe set as an example moving forward as well.
So this feels like a good time to follow, actually, as someone who lives in Canada. But I was going to add a little bit about that as well. So I hope a big part of the future of freshwater science management and policy is conservation. We all need to remember that water is not a commodity. Canada is also not as water rich as people think. And if we don't start thinking critically about protecting our water supplies and the Great Lakes now, then I think we're going to run into problems very soon. I also hope the future of freshwater science management and policy are more inclusive going forward, and that more Indigenous voices are brought to the forefront. I also think that we also have to start listening to our elders and youth more, because they kind of bring discussions full circle. And then I'd also hope that we do a better job on the engagement and inclusion going forward.
Right. That was a great note to end it off on. So I'm gonna call it there. If you have more specific questions that weren't answered, please feel free to email me, student@nalms.org, and I'll make sure that your question gets asked to the specific panelist. Or if you're attending the conference, Michelle suggested we can start a Whova chat. So we'll do that. But if you have questions, if you're not at the conference, just email me and I'll connect you. Yeah, so I would just like, I really hope that you learned something tonight and you made some connections, maybe met some new students through the chat. And I'd like to say a final thank you to Rachel, Michelle, Victoria, Ted, Emily, Kelly, Sabina, and Guy for all volunteering their time to be here with us tonight. And also thank you to the audience for coming and joining for an hour and a half on a Monday night. Well, or if it's not night, wherever you are, whatever time it is. So thank you all for coming. And I hope that we'll connect at some point in the future.
We can share our email and stuff too. I can throw mine in the chat if
Yeah.
you've got specific questions. You can either do that or go through the Whova app. Pretty much everyone on the panel I know or have met at least once, and we're all pretty cool with talking about whatever.
Thank you for having us.
That was so fun. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.